Hi, everybody. Wishing all of you a very good afternoon. I'm Praneeth. I'm the Associate Director for Upgrad Abroad. I look after university partnerships and the undergraduate business. And I'm going to be speaking about the different sort of factors, both extrinsic and intrinsic, that universities look out for when you get accepted into MBAs or an undergraduate or a usual graduate degree. Now, before I start, I think I'll just wait for another 2 or 3 or 4 minutes for everybody else to join in. But what I need you to know is that these webinars are bandwidth intensive, and so you may want to close down a few other tabs that, if in case you have them open, because it'll sort of affect the speed and bandwidth at which you're receiving the video and audio in this webinar. The other thing is you've got a Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom panel. Might as well make use of it, put down all your questions in case you have them. And feel free to ask me anything that you want. Again, I'm just going to give you the scope. So this webinar in its entirety is going to speak about, or is going to talk about the different set of factors that universities consider or keep in perspective when they accept you or decline your application towards MBA graduate courses, undergraduate courses across the world, be it the US, UK, Canada, Australia. While the US looks for profile building for both undergraduate and graduate degrees, Canada, UK, Australia, and almost every other part of the world would generally make use of this only when you're applying to an MBA or when you've got a lot of gap years in which having a good, rigorous, robust profile is essential and inevitable, because you generally are a little off track when it comes to the criteria. So essentially, what I'm trying to intend here is, if you're planning to study in the United States, having a good profile for yourself is extremely, extremely essential, and you just can't do without it. So that's the topic for the day, on what kind of factors and how do you get past them, and how do you prove a demonstrable candidature for yourself and some of the best MBAs across the world, right? So I'm going to wait for you guys to put down certain questions, whatever it is that you want to ask me. And I've also got a PowerPoint presentation with me this afternoon that I'm going to show you and discuss different factors as promised. We're just waiting for a couple of more attendees to join in. I request my team to kindly send a reminder message, or just have one sent to everybody else who registered for the webinar, so we can start on time. We're starting another 1 minute, just waiting for everybody else to join in, and we'll start right away. Meanwhile, feel free to put down any questions that you guys have for me, and make sure I address those in my presentation. What are the main points to be highlighted in personal statements? What do universities look for in them? So essentially, know-how, while I'm going to cover this in depth, one of the things that you need to know is anything empirical should not be on your personal statement. Anything that can actually be figured out by virtue of your documents, or by virtue of your transcripts, by virtue of your work experience certification, should not actually go in your personal statement. Everything between the lines and everything that is gray, everything that is in a sense, a reason why you took gap years, the reason why you could achieve what you could achieve, the reason why XYZ was your inspiration and that's what drove you, the reason that how is it that you've consistently followed your passion? How is it that you've consistently, but also in terms of progression, how have you progressively followed up with something that is your academic or professional pursuit? These things have to go in your personal statement about who you are. You color your personality, but you also let them know that which values govern you. You know, what are your key virtues at work and in academia, right? So that's what's supposed to go in your personal statement, but make sure everything empirical goes in your documents, everything that, you know, essentially is something that adds color to your candidature goes in your personal statement, right? So with that, I'll introduce myself one more time because we've got a lot more attendees now. I'd also request my colleague Arushi to please let Raj know that he can send a reminder message to everybody who registered for the webinar. But that's done by now. I'm going to share my screen, guys. Eventually, I'll introduce myself. So hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Praneeth. I'm the Associate Director for Upgrad Abroad. Upgrad is, as I'm sure you're aware, it's a higher education platform, one of South Asia's largest higher ed platforms. And we're essentially a teaching organization with our career first programs. We follow through in and throughout with every student who is studying with us, all the way until they find the right job for themselves, but also in development of the long-term career. So that's how long our value chain is for students who enter them. And essentially my topic for the day is going to be how do some of the top 100 universities, mostly Ivy League universities or Oxford or Cambridge, how do they really assess you? How is it that you can actually leave a mark and create a certain impression when you when you fill or when you apply to these schools, right? Here's a little bit about who I am. So I'm an alumnus of University of Pennsylvania. I did my master's and my executive ed both from UPenn. My master's was in global education entrepreneurship. UPenn is one of the finest ed schools in the world in the US. It's #2 in the US, #9 in the world. And I started at UPenn with a full scholarship, so I can eventually give you an experiential standpoint advice as well as what worked for me and what did not. I'm a speaker. I worked for the UN. I was also working for a non-profit from the years 2012 all the way to 2017, about 5 years, spent about 2 years working for the UN. I've held workshops for about 12,000 young individuals all the way from Portugal, Brazil, Colombia, Australia, Portugal, Spain, UK, so on and so forth. And I've also been an entrepreneur. So when I applied to UPenn, I had institutionalized 2 ventures. So I worked for the UN, I worked for a non-profit as its chief for India, and eventually applied to UPenn for my MSc. And right now I serve Upgrad. I serve as its head of university partnerships worldwide, and the business head for Undergraduate. Now, here are some of the key factors. So with a high rate or a high fraction of division of labor between machines, algorithms, and human beings, a lot of things are going to change, right? So essentially what this means for you guys is that most of the mainstream tasks, most of the routine tasks, or most of the tech stuff, most of operational stuff, mechanical stuff is ultimately going to be run by machines. And where you're going to be extremely orchestrated or useful for as human beings is going to be strategy, creativity, and design, right? These 3 things, and of course, topped by a strong amount of leadership in who you are and what you demonstrate and what you exhibit at workplace. Now, essentially, with that kind of a change in thinking seeping in already, by 2025, a lot of these things will change. So much so that if you had 10 jobs that you were essentially applying for, about 6 or 7 of them would be on the list that you've never even known. that were never even in place now because those jobs were never in place. Nobody really knows the kind of capabilities that those jobs demand. Essentially, what this means is for you to future-proof your career at this point, you need to know what are some of the things that I can equip myself with, what are some of the things that universities will care increasingly about, one of which is programming, one of which is design, one of which is creativity, one of which is being a good leader, one of which is caring for your community. These things are often neglected conventionally, but they're not supposed to be. So here's how the profile building cycle looks like. These are two rings. One is an auxiliary ring. One is a core ring, right? So you got, so essentially, if I talk about Harvard, if I talk about Oxford, if I talk about UCLA, if I talk about Berkeley, if I talk about Michigan, the core is essentially a hygiene to applying to these schools. Your GPA, of course, your SAT, GRE, GMAT, research, your project, your portfolio, your SOP, your LOR, and auxiliary things is what makes you stand out. The core ring of who you are as an applicant can largely vary from student to student, but is beyond the threshold always. And as long as you're beyond the threshold, you have as much chance as someone who's 10% above the threshold level than someone who's just 2% above the level. Auxiliary then is everything that makes an actual difference, all the way from your work experience to internships to online courses. Now, and entrepreneurship, awards, volunteering. Now, I have seen in my experience, in my classes, most Ivy League schools now are accepting underrepresented communities. And so there's been a lot of shift in the last 10, 15, 16, 18 years in which universities of that level, that repute, that caliber, have stopped, or let's say have started undervaluing academics as long as you're fulfilling the hygiene, overvaluing the diversity you bring, the intellectual vitality you bring, the perspective you bring in terms of your racial, ethnic background, also your educational experience, your experience at work, the initiatives that you've that have come from you, and how much value, how much dent have you made on the world, right? So these things are now increasingly important. Now, part of the things that you should expect from me in this session are going to be, how do you get into Harvard? How do you get into Oxford? How do you enter into Columbia, Cornell, MIT, but also enter with a scholarship? Now, while I might label this as these schools, that's essentially because, like I said to you, US and Canada essentially value profile for undergraduate, graduate, or almost any tertiary ed degree. They look at your profile. But everywhere across the world, it's just largely the business schools that actually look at what you've done beyond academics. Everywhere else, any other degree, they don't really care as long as you've got the requisite score that they need in your last academic qualification. Now, these are some of the additional X factors that universities care about. One is the concept or the practice or a demonstrable experience that you've had as a leader. One of the things that I want to really put across rather bluntly is that you should never confuse leadership with holding a title. It's supposed to be the initiatives that you've taken. It's supposed to be the turnkey solutions that you've introduced. It essentially means, for how many things in your life so far until you applied to that business school or that tech school, were you on the front lines? Were you leading from the front? Were you initiating? Were you the role model? All of that has to be mentioned. Someone here asked me what goes in your personal statement. This goes in your personal statement. How many things came from you? How many of those things created a dent on the universe? How many, by the universe, I mean, what did they actually achieve? How much value could you create for the world? How much impact did those things have? If you had a startup, how many consumers did that actually impact? How much repeat business did you have? What was the compound annual growth rate? All of that has to be mentioned demonstrably that that came from you. You were the one who was keen enough to start something from the scratch, but also follow it through until the very end when you started seeing that activity or that initiative show value, create value, demonstrate enough impact. Uniqueness, as in how many of you actually took out time or actually took out of the class hours to do something that others did not? That is essentially why I got a UPenn scholarship of 100% at the age of 25, when my classroom was filled with 40-year-olds who came on a full faith. I was by far the youngest, the only Indian, one of the only 3 Southeastern students, and of course, someone who was a corporate with an entrepreneurial experience. Everybody else was an academician. Some of them were school leaders. Some of them were university deans. So that's the thing that I'm trying to tell you, that how many of you had a unique path? And third, the consistency, the track record of success, that you did not just ace something in your life just once, you aced almost every time. But remember, when it comes to profile building, when it comes to applying to universities, which are some of the top 100 universities across the world, there is an important concept of depth versus breadth. Your initiatives, your efforts, your domain experience has to be deep rather than wide. If you picked up 100 things in the last 10 years, that matters less than if you took up 10 things that you have a very deep, lasting impression on, or you've done enough to follow them through all the way from year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4 of your degree, and finally starting on for adventure, finally opting for that degree now in your grad school. So these things really matter. Statistics and associations, my work with the UN, my work with the global non-profit, my work with so many different or so many sought after schools in Bali or Delhi or Germany or Japan did leave an impression on my faculty when I applied to UPenn. But what I'm trying to say is, if you're an employee with Deloitte, if you're an employee with McKinsey, if you're an employee with EY, if you're an employee with KPMG, those associations matter. I was in UN, I think in 2015, and I remember that there was this lady called Anna Saldiraga, who was one of our chiefs for the company I was serving then. And I remember her saying that if you join, now that you join the UN, you will someday become as big as the name of the UN. So her point was that you become as big or as large, as impressionable as the association that you're associated with. For example, if I work with Upgrad, then my stature is very much influenced by the organization that I'm serving, with the kind of universities I work with, right? So you become as enlarged, as expansive as a personal brand, similar to the kind of company that you serve. So for example, if you serve McKinsey, then you're a McKinsey consultant. So that has a lot of more value than if someone was a freelancing consultant, right? Okay. So here's a line that I wanted to leave you guys with, that have you done things that others did not? Have, interdisciplinary contribution, interdisciplinary work is now increasingly being valued and does positively impact the human capital. I wanted to show you something very important. Now, these are some of the things that are extremely important. One, an early start, not just in your application timeline. So there is a way to apply to the US universities called EDM, and early decision making. Almost 80% of all early decision makers actually get passed to the university as long as they fulfill the criteria. But early decision shows the firmness in your decision. It shows the enthusiasm for you, in you for that school. It shows that you're very clear-headed, but also have got enough achievements, enough credentials to back with and apply. So, compare it this way. As a normal university faculty who's checking the applicants, who am I rather more likely to pick? Someone who's already ready for it in December for the next fall, or someone who's gone all the way until April to finally get everything together for 3, 4, 5 months, is trying to get more done just to clear the criteria. So EDMs are actually the ones that get passed. it's not a mandatory, it's not a guaranteed thing, but more likely than not, that's the thing. But an early start here for me actually meant that if you're applying for an undergraduate degree, you should start contributing to that stream starting grade 9, starting grade 8. Now, if you are applying for a master's degree, you should have started working on the kind of core skill set starting from year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, sometimes even school. Now, what I mean by that is if you're doing actuarial science or an analytics degree or a machine learning degree, calculus, statistics are two important orchestrative, inevitable skills. So show your calculus scores all the way from grade 12 to year 1, year 2, year 3. Anything that involves calculus, you should be super at it, right? If it comes to programming, knowing a few more languages than other routine folks is always better. But also programming is super important, not just on the theory side of it, but the applied side of it. If you're a programmer, I'm sure you've heard of GitHub. GitHub is one way of demonstrably getting your portfolio out in the world. But what it's also important for us to show the university faculty that whatever programming languages you've done, what have you created with it? Have you initiated a new startup online? Have you found a solution to a world issue through programming, or have you built an algorithm that constructively solves a specific issue or specific concern for folks with you or someone who's facing a specific challenge? The point is, how much economic or social value are you creating just by your skills? That's something that I need you to understand. I got into UPenn on a scholarship because I could demonstrably, constructively, viably do something with the skills I honed. So there are 3 things. Always remember a good summary. 1, have you taken out the time to do extra high-level courses outside your routine curriculum of coursework in the university? If yes, you are 10% inside Harvard, enrolled in Harvard. If you did extra courses, more challenging, more rigorous, more robust than the other rest of the class did. Second, for all the skills you've honed through all of these courses or through all of the practice or through all of the experience, what did you actually create in terms of social or economic value? And number 3, have you got all the portfolio together? Is there a visibility on your work? These 3 things matter the most. And how early did you start it? How can you demonstrably show me the progression in your academic or professional trajectory year on year? So for example, grade 9 is when I discovered something. Grade 10 is when I started doing something about it. By the first year of my university, I started researching. By the year 2, I started following a supervisor in a university outside my own and started learning. And then by year 3 or year 4, I had a startup or had an entrepreneurial venture. I had an initiative backed by that research that I did year on year on year on year. But also every year, I microscopically delved into a specific portion of the entire coursework that I was interested in, or the entire domain scope of work that I was interested in. So how concentrated, how focused, how intensive is your work in the field? It really matters. Depth versus breadth is something I covered with you already. Depth is picking 4 things, but deeply investing yourself in it in time, effort, intellect, and outcomes. Breadth is picking a range of things, but not having done enough in either. This thing is something that I already covered with you, that what is the applied demonstration of skill set. Now, a portfolio can normally have the apps that you build. It can have the web pages that you build. Now, all of this that I'm speaking about is more tech driven, but if on the business side, how much value have you created in businesses across the world with the kind of skills you've honed? Number 3, essentially, if you were an architecture student, or if you're an interior design student, or if you're, if you're a student of, let's say, psychology, then what's your research portfolio been like? what is what are some of the clients that you've served? What are some of the case stories, or what are some of the um, say what are some of the clients that you helped, and where are they now compared to where they were when they came to you? So an applied demonstration of all your skills that you collectively possess. Now, always remember that while a high GPA and test scores are still a very good signal of your ability to thrive in a university like Harvard or a difficult, rigorous academic environment, universities are now increasingly placing importance on your extracurricular or 360-degree credentials. Now, Ivy League universities, for example, are typically on the lookout for someone who, of course, has consistent good grades, but is constantly working on honing their virtual, verbal, writing, and higher order thinking abilities. One of the other things that they also value is your ability to know a foreign language. If you know a foreign language, it's always, always, always more sought after than you would think. Some students who know French, students who know German, these students are always, always, always more preferred when it comes to your relative standing with respect to other students. And someone, like I said, who's taken up challenging courses, but has taken up the time and initiative to learn and explore new things. Now, here's something that I wanted to read out. So these things that I collated are actually universities, which are some of the best universities across the world. What do they essentially look out for? Now, let's look at Harvard. Harvard says we seek to identify students who will be the best educators of one another and their professors. Essentially, that means that what they're looking for is not just someone who's very academically bright, but a strong leader, a strong team player, a strong collaborative player who keeps into aspect the emotional intelligence or the emotional quotient when it comes to handling the dynamics of a group, which essentially means someone who gets an informal authority over their peer group by their intellectual vitality, but also by their social skills, but also by their academic proficiency, right? Stanford says we review applications holistically, focusing on academic excellence, intellectual vitality, and personal context. Now, what exactly is personal context? Somebody asked me, what do I put in my personal statement? Personal context is your ethnic background, the diversity. What does your father or mother do? How did you act? I mean, are you a first-gen university student, or you are second-gen, third-gen? And how did your interest in Harvard develop? That ranges all the way from knowing the kind of course that you want to do and why do you want to do that, but also knowing every single person on the faculty, but also knowing every single laboratory or infrastructural nuance that you get at Harvard, but also knowing where all what are some of the opportunities that Harvard will give you that no other school will. So knowing your university in and out is also one of the things on the personal context. And how does this fit into your story? Always remember your SOP or your personal statements are always a bridge part of your career. Now, they are supposed to highlight or focus or emphasize on how that university is a bridge towards your career. So it's instead of showing that is the university that I've always wanted to study with, and that is where my life ends, or my life, my life goals converge at. No, you're supposed to show or exhibit or demonstrate in your SOP or your personal statement that is just a conduit to my aspirations, to my inspiration, to my dreams, to my final life goals. This is just an enabler of that. Southern California says we look for students who possess potential to contribute a diverse and vibrant college life, who represent a vast array of interests and passion, and leaders unafraid to speak up and classify for a cause. Someone who's done a lot of community service is always accepted at USC. Now, community service essentially is what have you done socially? Harvard, MIT, all of these universities look for social, economic commercial and intellectual leaders who are thought leaders more than someone who's an entrepreneur, as much as, entrepreneurs are welcome. Now, your cultural context is very important. Your values are very important, but not just writing which values you practice, but essentially showing a demonstrable life story or using storytelling as an art to explain how did your values indicatively directed you into the life paths that you have at this point. How did they not just dictate, but build your growth curve around or along these years? For example, one of the values that I have is striving for excellence. If I am putting that out in my personal statement, I need to show them what are some of the areas in my life, academic and at work, where I've strived for excellence. And and where did I reach so far? And more, we are looking to challenge one another to be the best that we can be. Also, here's something that I want you to know. I was 25, my cohort had students on an average of 40 to 45 years of age. Why did they still pick me? That's because universities like Harvard, UPenn, Cornell, Columbia, Yale, they're essentially now looking at what are you bringing to us more than what are we delivering to you. So sometimes your personal statements or your SOP or your essays should be speaking more loudly about what you bring to the classroom, the years of entrepreneurial experience, the years of research experience, the years of a specific domain experience that you bring inside the classroom that's going to help every other peer group in your class to learn from you, to solve constructively, collaboratively with you. That's what universities are increasingly looking for. Now, I'm sure you know Yale. Yale says, I'm inclined to believe the person who gives every ounce to do something superbly has an advantage of the person whose capacities may be great, but seems to have no desire to stretch to them to their limit. So essentially, like I said, you show them that you started from grade 9, and you show them that until the final year of college in the last 7 years, what have you been able to achieve that no other person possibly of your age can do or has done, right? So sometimes it's great to show them, I'm great academically. These are the scores that I've had, but that's not the person that gets into Harvard. The person who gets into Harvard is the person who has a portfolio of applied learning, applied science, applied skills, who's built something out of it, right? Dartmouth, which is another Ivy League university, says it brings something unique to the community, a combination of qualities, experiences, point of view that isn't duplicated by any other student. This is the key factor. Point of view that isn't duplicated by other students. Now, one of the things that I want to break out for you is universities now increasingly value philosophy. Your philosophical point of view is actually very important about how you perceive life, but how is Yale going to be a stepping stone for you? Now, everybody has a subjective reason to it, but your essay, your personal statement, your SOP has the power to make the faculty person who's reading SOP fall in love with your application and what you're bringing to the table. So it should be accumulation of your majors, the subjects that you pick, the interests that you have, the scores that you bring, the strengths that you have, the challenges you faced in your life, and how did you face them head on? How did you stand strong in the face of adversity? What are some of the inspirations that you got from? What are your future goals? Your goals are very important. Let's look at MIT. MIT is the #1 technology school in the world. You should be investing in things that really mean something to you. Explore, choose quality over quantity. You don't have to do a million things to get in college. Just put your heart into things you really care about, and that will be enough. So, for example, if I am a UI UX expert, how many apps did I build? How much growth did those apps have the moment I built the design? To what extent did I or could I meet the client's requirement to what I essentially built or try to create for them? And how much growth was there after I built something? What's been the diversity of things that I built? But also, how did I hone my skill set every single day as I went to work? All of these things. And finally, UPenn, my automator, says academics are an important part of the application, but also want to know that you like what you like outside the classroom. How do you spend time outside the classroom is extremely important. The activities section of the application offers our admissions committee and consider what excites you, what you're passionate about, and what responsibilities you have at home, and some of the ways you're contributing to your community. So a good mix of your social life, your work experience, your academic pursuits, but also what you like outside the classroom, what you enjoy. So remember, enjoying could be reading, enjoying could be sports, enjoying could be running a club, like an entrepreneurial club or a sports club or XYZ. But sometimes outside the classroom can also mean, have you constructively been instrumental and influential to your community? Most of the Ivy Leagues are looking for community leaders more than they're looking for individual experts, right? By community leader, I mean if you're leading the peer group that you're part of from the front, if you're leading, venture from the front, if you're leading as a thought leader, a certain group of folks who are following your vision into something. And finally, Oxford, the common denominator at Oxford is the ability to think deeply, is the ability to look at anything, whether it's a newspaper article, piece of research, and instinctively start considering the theory behind it, the potential impacts on a wider level, your own position and thoughts about it, what other folks might think is the ability to refuse to take things at face value. So this, as I decrypt, this means that your power to research. Now, all research. So one of the things that I want you to know is be very conscious, be mindful, and conscientiously approach that. Are you going into a practice-based university, a more working professional intensive university, or are you going to a research intensive university? If you're going to Oxford and Cambridge, these are research driven universities. So in a university like that, your research skills matter the most. Your research, the depth, the domain, your revelations, your collaborative research work. What have you been able to establish as a hypothesis? What have you been able to bring out from your research, and who are you influencing with it? All of this in the last 6, 7, 5, 4, as many years as you've been doing it, what really came out of it? What was the outcome, and what was the process like, right? And how did you grow with it? And where do you stand at this point? Who is your key supervisor? Who are you leading? Who are you mentoring? What infrastructural equipments are you using? How deep or how microscopically have you started looking at one specific aspect of the entire domain that you're looking at? At this point, I think I'm just going to take a little break and look at the questions that you guys have asked me. Which one is best, honors or UG? So an honors degree can be in either tertiary level, whether it's UG or PG. It basically means a specific set of score that you get on your final year, and confluenced with a specific set of additional subjects or an additional let's say, concentration of study that you pick up. But an honors degree is always more valued, right? Can we get a copy of the file you shared? 100%. Yeah. I'm currently doing masters in biomedical engineering in Tamil Nadu. PhD is a very interesting concept. So of course you can do PhD. PhD exists to ensure that you are able to research and create some output or create some value for the universities that's offering PhD. So PhD exists to for students to enroll into. So I don't think that's worthwhile to ask. But if you're asking me, how can I enroll into a PhD? PhD is a typical research degree. For that to happen, it really does matter that what your master's for domain has been, and what inside the domain is one specific part of things that you would want to establish or a certain more research in. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? What is your area of research? And does that area of research actually is something that the world needs to know more of? Who is your supervisor? If you're able to find that, create a synopsis and put forth a proposition, a PhD is a great option. But for that, I think you have to establish yourself as an expert, as a thought leader in that domain, enough to know that what do I want to do at the other end of having done a PhD, right? That's something that's extremely important more than anything else. For PhD, there's a specific length of degree that you need to do. So, for example, in Germany, only a specific length of master's degree can let you enroll into a doctorate degree. You can't do a short, fast, instant master's of 60 CTS and get into a PhD. You need a concrete, long, comprehensive degree to be enrolled into a PhD. A PhD also needs for you to ensure that you've gotten enough infrastructure around you to fulfill your research requirements, right? Please let me know the list of universities in US and Ireland. Sachin, the US has about 4,500 universities. It's very difficult to make a list, but one of the best things that you can do is go for US News ranking, and they will eventually have enough universities on their list to show you or give you a good insight into this. Do universities look for entrance exams or exams like SAT? Yes. So the American college testing, the ACT or SAT, is extremely important when it comes to undergraduate studies. GMAT, GRE is increasingly, or increasingly now being let gone off as an admissions requirement, but there are still universities across the world that accept it. Upgrad, for example, for one, it does not need GRE, GMAT, or SAT when it comes to graduate or undergraduate degrees, respectively. And so I'll take a quick minute to explain the model on which Upgrad really runs. Upgrad lets working professionals across India or class 12 graduates or students who've done their class 12 for an undergraduate degree start in India for about 6 months to 1 year and then eventually transfer on campus. That helps you with three things. Look, number one, if you want to study abroad, you either have the Jan intake or the fall intake, which is spring or fall, Jan or October, or Jan or September. Upgrad lets you pursue or start the degree anytime in the year so that the next available intake of college, whether it's January or September, you're going there having done a bit of coursework and not wasted time. That essentially, point two, helps you save a lot of money because you almost save 6 months of tuition, but also 6 months of living costs. So you end up saving a lot of money. And third of all, if you're someone who's changing streams, who's going from data science to an MBA, or who's going from a BBA to a business analytics degree, or who's going from a BCom to a computer engineering degree, Upgrad makes it possible for you because you've got a coursework that you can do, which is a pathway on a graduate level as a diploma. So you can now maneuver your way or navigate your way through, a cross-domain degree that you pick up, right? So that's how the Upgrad model actually works. And so our Indian portion is with IIIT Bangalore, India's #1 private tech school. Our business portion is with Golden Gate University, San Francisco, IMT Ghaziabad, which is an AACSP school. And once you do these courses online, even if you're working somewhere, you can still do it online. You just have to commit 10 to 12 hours a week, whether you do this on a Saturday or Sunday. But this program alone, or these programs alone, waive off one complete semester when you go to Germany, Finland, England, Scotland, Australia, US, Canada, anywhere in the world. You actually get one semester waived off. That's how the Upgrad model works like. So it's an increasingly interesting proposition. And we've now added about 52 universities, which you can go simply because you do the graduate diploma or the graduate certificate with Upgrad. Is there any other question? I'd love to take any question. Can you tell me which country is better for MA in clinical psychology? I think my pick would be the United States. Uh, uh, but remember, clinical psychology has to be backed or reinforced by a PhD because psychology has a lot of levels to it. Psychology has a lot of subdomains to it. Whether you're looking into child psychology, whether you're looking into psychiatry, whether you're looking into specific aspects of it. So being able to establish expertise in one specific subdomain is very important eventually. And your research work and doing your PhD is very important for you to establish yourself and get the psychologist license. Even Australia is a very great proposition for psychology. But yeah, US number one, UK would be number two, and then Australia would be number three. One of the other things that I would recommend that you do, and we have a course in it, is called an MBA Industrial Organization Psychology. That means one, you don't really need to do a 10-year academic uh, trajectory, um, all the way to establishing your career in psychology or psychiatry. An MBA in industrial organization psychology means that you put all these psychology fundamentals, principles, theorem, and the practices into developing an efficient, productive workspace and work culture in global companies. So since 2018, the industrial organization psychology field has been on the rise, and it essentially means that you boost employee productivity, efficiency by ensuring that you put psychology in the center of when you develop the company policies, the cultural norms, but also have an active role to play in the company strategy and how do you translate it or how do you, sort of apply it or, at the grassroots level. How do you disseminate information? How do you condense everything to a grassroots level? So all of this using psychology the labor and human psychology, keeping that in the center. Which universities or schools are under Upgrad? Where do we do first 6 months? So you do the first 6 months or 8 months or 1 year online, depending on which course you're picking up. We've got Triple IT Bangalore, we've got Golden Gate University, we've got IMT, and we've got Atlas Skill Tech University, Mumbai. Now, actually, you don't really need to do 2 years. A standard master's can be anywhere between 1.5 year, 1.5 to almost 2 years. And with Upgrad, you at least cut down the master's all the way from 6 months to 1 year. For example, US masters are 2 years on a general standard, always will be the case. But with Upgrad, that's a 1+1. So you do 8 months of Indian coursework, and then you finally move to the United States, and then you just do it in 1 year and you're done. So essentially, you're saving 1 year of living costs just because you did the first year of coursework in India from your home, and you establish a good grade, and that give you 1 semester of complete waiver, right? We've got some more questions. Should I go for MSc after BA rather than MA, and why? Um, so look, the nomenclature of degrees everywhere is very different. Some countries like Canada would have an MA psychology or would have an MSc psychology with the difference in core subjects, right? And then, of course, with specialized subjects of psychology and a suitable majors or a suitable concentration, which is the area of specialized studies. Which concentration you pick up is going to be more you would have much more variations of it in an MSc rather than MA. And the MSc would be essentially a more theory, a more coursework, a more intensive degree compared to an MA. Sometimes what matters in these two degrees are the core subjects. So when you have psychology as the concentration, or psychology as the major field of study, then science would have a lot of, let's say, a lot of biological and human sciences and let's say, a lot of um, you know, domain intensive sciences to it. For example, the general behavior, the general science of understanding human psychology or child psychology, actually. While MA would have more of varied fields of arts in which psychology plays a key role, or in which psychology has emerged to be an influential factor, right? So I hope you get the point. So, a sign, an MSc would be a very theory and science intensive degree, while MA would be more of a recognition of history and recognition of other fields of arts in which psychology has played a key influence. While both of them are going to be research degrees, my pick would be an MSc degree more than an MA psychology degree. But remember, some degrees are only offered in one of these, right? Recommend universities for computer science, which I can do for Upgrad for UG in US. Well, I think for computer science, Germany is a huge market. My advice, my idea for choosing the right university is always based on three factors. One, um, whichever course you pick up, it should be infusible with technology. In about 5 years, if there's something that's non-infusible with technology or cannot play along with technology, then that's probably not the right domain to pick at this point. Number two, it should be a very sustainable field. You should see a future with that field about 5 or 10 years. Should not be at the brink that it can be rendered obsolete anytime now. And third is that it should give you an equity in global job market. It should be an equitable course, which means that when you have those skill set, you're pretty much in demand anywhere across the world. So you don't just have an equity in a specific job market, but you've got an equity, in a variety of industries. For example, why data science or AI or computer science or design skills, these have so much importance than anything else, or even analytics. These things have so much more importance than anything else, or let's say cybersecurity, because this is essentially a set of skills that can be applied or put into aspect anywhere across any industry, right? Every single industry in the world right now needs data as its fuel, needs good analytic experts who can decipher the customer behavior, the supply chain, the operations, and create enterprises that are more efficient, more productive. By extrapolating patterns from the record of numbers that they have or statistics that they have. So pick up these courses because these make more sense in the kind of global context that we're in right now. Are there any research universities in Germany? Yes, we've got a few universities with us. We've got ISM, we've got UE, and you can, of course, pursue a data science degree, an MBA degree, an MSc in business intelligence, an MIM, or an MBA and different things. For DS, we've got University of Europe for Applied Sciences. Yes. Are there any courses available for undergraduate in IIIT Bangalore from Upgrad? So not really. So Upgrad does not really. So Upgrad abroad does not really give you domestic degrees. We give you domestic pathways, which mean you start your degree in India online for about 4 months or 5 months or 8 months, then you eventually go to the university abroad. So from day one, you're a student of that university abroad, whether it's in Scotland or England or Finland or France or Germany or Australia or US or UK. And India is just is only a country where you're studying online for some time, but you're not enrolled into an Indian university. You're still a student of the university partner abroad that you've gone. For more information, you can of course go to upgradabroad.com and figure out. I request my colleague Arushi to put down a message for the kind of courses that we have and the navigation links that are available or will be made available to you now. And you can, of course, browse through them and see which courses fit your interests. But remember that um, some of these universities are, uh, give you additional scholarships just because you're an upgrad student. And always remember that some of these universities bypass the kind of things that I spoke to you on this webinar, starting with your profile, community service, your portfolio. Here's that survey. So our university upgrad partners would not look at all of this because you've demonstrably proven your academic vigor or academic readiness by doing a pathway, right? But remember that if you have these things, this can always get you more scholarships and can increase the perceptibility. One of the other things that I really want you to know is sometimes profile building should not just be looked at as a criteria to get into a university. Rather, having a rigorous, robust profile sometimes is so important when it comes to your perceptibility in the university. How does the faculty look at you? Your faculty is very instrumental in drafting an LOR for you, a letter of recommendation. Finding jobs abroad is not really very easy. You have to have your faculty backing you. They have to write an LOR for you. You have to network sternly, strongly enough, and you have to know the who's who to actually apply and be considered for a job. Now, the profile building sometimes, for what it's worth during admissions, is certainly very, very, very coveted and valuable when it comes to networking with your future or potential employees, but also your visibility inside the university classroom, that here is a student who's done multiple entrepreneurial ventures, who's done multiple grad level courses, who's had an and excellence in certain programming languages or business skills, or he or she's made an empire of $1 million USD just when they were 21 or 22. So these things actually make you stand out. So this impacts your employability also. So just make sure you take a quick screenshot of this this picture of auxiliary and core profile building parts, and they're going to be of extreme help to you, not just now, but also when you get a job. I hope I answered all the questions that you guys had for me. Upgrad our tie-ups with university. Yes, we've got a university called Golden Gate University that's in the lap of Silicon Valley, San Francisco. We've got an MS Business Analytics, MS Project Management, and MBA. And we've got a doctorate of business administration with Golden Gate. And so what you've got to do, Roshan, is my colleague Arushi has put down a few links in the chat box. Open the chat box, open the right course for yourself, and register online, and somebody from our team will reach out to you, right? So you don't really have to go anywhere for admission. This is going to be a virtual process, and they will reach out to you, right? Also, if you guys have got gap years, Upgrad has tons of courses in the UK and Germany that accept gap years now. So you're all set. And if you're a working professional, then what matters the most right now is that you've got relevant work experience. And even if you don't, what you can do is, when we have our pathways, when you start through our pathways, you can actually make yourself eligible for a career or a industry or a domain or a field switch just by scoring enough marks in the pathway that we have for you in technology or management. One of the other things is right now you don't have to abruptly shut your work assignment or leave your job or resign. You can continue with your job, pursue a course or pathway online, and then eventually transfer on campus whenever you are ready, even if that means after a year, even if that means after 1.5 years. But by the time you actually go to the university abroad, you're halfway through the degree, you're done with the complete semester. So that's the extra potential advantages that you have as an upgrad student. I hope I answered all of you. I wish you guys all the best. I'm just going to give you my email address and my LinkedIn for you guys to reach out to me if in case you need any help from my end, or if I can guide you in any specific way. I've got a question here. Do universities in Canada that say that they agree a 3 years bachelor's degree really do agree, given that I mean, Jami, that's a very interesting question that you put there. So Canada and the US have a 12+4 academic structure. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can't bypass it. That just means that if there's a university that's very let's say very rigid about 12+4 setup only, you can do an additional year of graduate coursework. So when you come to Upgrad, we help you build or do or pursue a complete 1 year of bridge coursework. And then it makes you eligible for universities like University of Toronto, UBC, McGill, McMaster's in Canada, similarly Harvard, Stanford, all of these, Georgia Tech. So you don't necessarily have to do a 3 year. I mean, even if you've done a 3 year degree, you don't have a 4 year degree, you can still do 1 year of graduate coursework and then get past that requirement. So you're all set. But yes, not all universities in Canada are fussy or rigid about 12+4. Some accept you after 3. But remember, it's always advisable to do an additional year of coursework rather than getting your visa rejected just because you don't meet the requirements. Right, and Upgrad always has a solution for that. We've got IMT triple IDP, which help you with that. I think that should be the end of it. We're on time. I've given you my email. Oh, sorry. LinkedIn, I spelled the URL wrong. You've got my URL now. You can always send me a message if in case, and then I can also give you my email address if you want to explore courses with Upgrad or take any advice from me. I wish you guys all the best, and thank you for being a lovely audience. Thank you.